Why did no one notice her leave the table? The others were still talking, arguing over maps, voices stacked over one another like static. She slipped away without a word, her chair scraping once against the concrete floor, then silence. No one asked where she was going. No one even looked. It wasn't the first time. The room reeked of coffee and sweat, stale air trapped under humming fluorescent lights. Her headset hung loose around her neck, her rifle case leaned against the wall. They talked as though she wasn't there, as though her input didn't matter. Maybe it didn't. Maybe she had grown used to that. But there was something she hadn't told them, not yet. She walked the narrow corridor outside the briefing room, boots echoing in hollow steps. The night beyond the base walls was already thick with wind and grit, the desert swallowing sound like a secret. She pressed her palm against the steel door, felt the coolness vibrate faintly with distant generators, and stepped out. The sky was sharp with stars, thin clouds dragging like smoke. She exhaled, steadying herself. She wasn't leaving because of pride. Not tonight. She was leaving because she knew where she needed to be. And because she could not fail this time. Her name wasn't spoken often, not even among the unit. Call signs replaced identities here as though real names carried too much weight, too much risk. She had been Vega for 3 years now. Before that, she had been someone else, someone softer, someone who still smiled when letters came in the mail. But Vega didn't smile anymore. She climbed the outer stairwell to the observation tower, hands brushing rusted rails, senses tuned to every whisper of the night. She wasn't assigned to watch duty. She wasn't expected here. And yet this was where her role began. Not at the table, not in their debates, but in the silence above them all. She laid the case down gently, clicking open the locks. The rifle gleamed in fragments of starlight. She assembled it with practiced precision, every part sliding into place like it belonged to her. The scope caught the faint glow of the horizon. She knew what was coming. No one else did. Down below in the kill zone they hadn't yet realized was a trap, men would soon walk into the open. They trusted intelligence. They trusted timing. They trusted each other. But she trusted something different. Instinct. Memory. The faint tremor of a pattern she recognized, though she could not explain it. And there it was, the ache again. That feeling in her chest she could not quiet. The one that reminded her why she did this, why she stayed, why she bore the silence of being invisible. Because once, years ago, she had ignored that same ache, and someone she loved had paid the price. Her cheek pressed against the rifle's stock, the glass of the scope sharp and merciless. The desert floor spread out like an ocean of ash and stone. She adjusted the dial, searching for movement, for shadows that didn't belong. She found them. 3 figures on the ridge opposite, too still, too quiet, waiting. Her breath slowed. She could call it in. But they wouldn't listen, not in time. They would argue, delay, check their maps again. And by the time someone believed her, it would be too late. So she said nothing. The SEAL team below moved into position, unaware of the crossfire tightening around them. Their boots disturbed dust, their weapons held ready. She could hear faint chatter through the comm in her ear, detached and casual, men masking nerves with clipped words. She knew some of their voices. Not friends, not exactly, but familiar. One of them had laughed with her once over an MRE that had spoiled in the heat. Another had offered her a cigarette she didn't take, small gestures that lingered longer than they should. She adjusted her aim. The figures on the opposite ridge leaned forward, weapons catching the faintest reflection of moonlight. The trap was real. Her finger hovered on the trigger. And in that pause, memory flooded her, sandbags, a burning convoy, a voice screaming over the radio. She had been too slow then. She had hesitated, doubted her instinct. By the time she fired, the convoy was already gone, and so was the one person she could never replace. Not again. Her shot broke the silence like glass shattering, a single crack across the valley. One figure collapsed instantly, body crumpling into the dust. The others ducked, confusion flaring. The SEALs below froze, stunned. Voices filled the calm, sudden, urgent. Contact, contact, East Ridge, who's firing? But she didn't answer. She was already shifting, sight fixed on the second target. Breath in, exhale slow. Another shot. Another body hit the ground. The team below dove for cover, scrambling into position, caught between fear and disbelief. They had walked into a kill zone, but someone unseen had fired first. Her heart pounded in her ears. Sweat trickled down her temple, the rifle steady despite the storm in her chest. She wasn't supposed to be here. She wasn't supposed to intervene like this. But rules didn't matter anymore. Only this moment. The third figure moved, sprinting for cover, weapon raised. She tracked him, pulse steadying as though her body knew this dance by heart. He turned, searching the ridge for her, but he would never see her. Her shot caught him mid-stride. Silence followed. The SEALs' voices returned, tense, confused, alive. "Sniper, do you see it? Do you wait? What the hell just happened?" She lowered her head for a moment, eyes closing against the pull of memory. 3 bodies down, a dozen lives saved for now. But she knew this wasn't over. The kill zone was deeper than they realized, the ambush wider. She stayed on her scope, scanning, waiting. Somewhere deep down, she wondered if any of them would ask who had fired, if any of them would remember the shot that had spared them. But she doubted it. They never saw her. That was the price of her silence. And still she stayed. Because this time she couldn't walk away. Why didn't anyone ask where the shots came from? The men below were alive because of her, but their voices carried nothing of gratitude, only confusion, only fear. East Ridge, someone barked into comms. Multiple down, keep your sectors. Boots thudded across the dirt, gear rattled as they dragged themselves behind boulders and broken terrain. They were trained for this. React, survive, return fire. But there was no return fire. Not anymore. She lay still behind her scope, cheek pressed to the cold metal. The world narrowed into silence, the kind that arrives after chaos, when ears strain for the next shot that never comes. She exhaled slowly, her breath clouding faintly in the cool desert air. No one called her name. Not that they would. Her pulse had steadied, but her chest was tight with something she couldn't name. Relief, maybe, or shame. Because the truth was she hadn't done it for them. Not entirely. She had done it because she couldn't bear another hesitation, another silence that cost lives. And because there was something she was running from. She eased her eye away from the scope, the world widening again. Wind pushed across the ridge, carrying sand into her hair, into her skin. Below, the SEALs regrouped, voices cracking through static. Clear that sector. Eyes north, North Ridge. No visuals on shooter. They didn't know she was their ghost, and maybe that was for the best. Her hand hovered near the comm switch. One word, just one, would reveal her, but she pulled her hand back. Not yet, not until she was sure. She wiped sweat from her brow, fingers trembling briefly before she clenched them into a fist. A memory flickered, her brother's laugh, his crooked grin in the fading light of their childhood backyard. He had worn the same uniform once. He had believed in rules, in structure, in trust. Until the day trust wasn't enough. The convoy had been his last mission. She had been too slow. She hadn't fired when she could have. She had doubted herself, followed orders, waited for confirmation. And by the time confirmation came, the blast had already torn through steel and fire and bone. Her throat tightened. She had buried that laugh in silence, and she had sworn never again. Movement below snapped her back. 2 SEALs were dragging one of their own, his leg bent unnaturally, blood dark against the sand. He wasn't dead. Not yet. But he wouldn't last long without help. Their voices cracked in her ear, urgent. "We need evac, grid 47 Delta, copy, over." Silence on the other end. Then static. No answer. She closed her eyes, listening to the dead air. The base wasn't responding, or maybe the signal was jammed. Either way, they were alone. And she with them. Her rifle shifted again, scope sweeping across the valley. Empty rocks, scattered brush. Shadows stretched long in the moonlight, deceptive and restless. She knew this wasn't over. The first three had been spotters, not the kill team itself. More would come. They always did. Vega, a voice whispered in her ear. Not through the comms, but memory. Her brother's voice, soft, teasing. You're too careful, too quiet. She pressed her lips together, breath sharp. Careful, quiet. That was all she had left. But sometimes, silence wasn't enough. The seals below argued now, half whispers, half anger. She couldn't make out every word, but she heard fragments. Trap. Too exposed. No air support. One of them sat hard against a rock, hands gripping his helmet. His voice broke low, almost human, stripped of bravado. This doesn't feel right. None of this feels right. Another spat back. Shut it down, we move or we die. For a heartbeat, they weren't operators. They were just men, tired, afraid, caught in a place where death moved like smoke. And for that heartbeat, she felt something ache inside her. Because she knew that fear. She had lived it once, sitting in a convoy truck, clutching her rifle, waiting for a sound she didn't recognize. Waiting for permission that came too late. Her hand slid back to the comm switch. She hovered again. She could guide them, she could save them. But with that choice came a cost, exposure, questions, and maybe blame. They didn't want her here, not really. She knew the looks, the half-smiles, the dismissive silence at the table. A sniper they tolerated, a woman they doubted. They wouldn't say it, but she had felt it. The weight of being unseen, even in plain sight. And yet unseen was where she thrived. Her scope caught a flicker of movement, West Ridge this time. She froze, adjusting the magnification. 3 more figures, shadows slipping between rocks, weapons glinting faintly, patient, waiting. Her chest constricted. The seals hadn't seen them yet. She whispered to herself, barely audible, not again. Her finger curled on the trigger, slow, steady, but something in her hesitated. These weren't just marks on a ridge. They were living, breathing, moving like men who had mothers, maybe wives, maybe children. She could see the way one adjusted his strap, the way another rubbed his shoulder. Small gestures of exhaustion, of humanity. She bit down on the thought. If she saw them as men, she couldn't do this. Not cleanly, not without shaking. So she narrowed her focus. Breath in, exhale, a squeeze, not a pull. The first fell without sound. The others scattered, diving for rocks. Her shots followed, each crack splitting the air, echoing off the valley walls. One body jerked, fell. The third vanished into shadow. Shouts erupted below. Sniper, who the hell, where's it coming from? Her pulse hammered. The comm crackled finally, a voice from command. Team Bravo, copy status. Do you read? Static drowned the reply, then silence again. She clenched her jaw. Something was wrong, too wrong. The silence wasn't just jamming, it felt orchestrated. The enemy wasn't rushing them, not yet. They were holding, testing, waiting for something bigger. And she was alone in knowing it. Her scope swept again, restless. Empty valleys, cold stars, the smell of sand and oil. Her breath fogged the lens. Somewhere in the stillness, she realized she was trembling, not from fear but from something deeper. Rage. At herself. At the silence of command. At the way these men below would never know whose finger had spared them. But maybe that was the point. Her brother hadn't died for recognition. He had died because silence had chained her hands. She would not be silent now. Her hand pressed the comm switch finally, thumb holding down. Her voice came low, steady, breaking through their confusion. Eyes West Ridge, she said. Every voice below froze. There was a beat long enough for doubt to rise. Then one of them answered, cautious. Who the hell? But before he finished, another shadow shifted on the ridge. A man raising his rifle. And before he could fire, her shot split the air. The valley went quiet again. Her name wasn't spoken, but for the first time they knew she was there. Why didn't they ask who she was? Her voice had cracked through the comms, sharp, undeniable, yet no one demanded a name. They obeyed instantly, shifting their rifles toward the west ridge, eyes straining into the shadows she had already cleared. For a heartbeat, she was the unseen hand that turned chaos into order. Then silence. "Copy west," one SEAL muttered, his tone clipped, cautious. Another added, "Still no visuals." Her heart pressed against her ribs. They heard her. They trusted her, at least for that moment. But trust like this was fragile. It would last only as long as her shots kept them breathing. She pulled her cheek back from the stock, shoulders stiff. Her throat burned dry. She hadn't spoken on open comms in months. Not like that. Her presence would raise questions later, questions she wasn't ready to answer. But questions were better than body bags. Her scope swept again, glass reflecting pale starlight. The desert stretched endless, a sea of sand and broken stone. The SEALs crouched low, clustered behind boulders, trying to decide whether to push forward or fall back. Their voices drifted up to her in pieces, words lost to the wind. She could almost read their faces even at this distance. The tight jaws, the darting eyes, the clenched fists around their weapons. Men who lived at the knife's edge but feared the blade pressing closer. And then a flicker. Her body stiffened, south ridge. A faint shape shifting in the shadows, then gone. She adjusted quickly, glass finding the faint shimmer again. A man, no, a line of them, moving low, coordinated, patient. She counted 4, then 6, then more. Her breath stalled. This wasn't just a kill zone. This was a net. The SEALs didn't see it yet. They thought the trap had been broken when she fired the first time. They thought luck had spared them, but luck had nothing to do with it. The enemy wasn't withdrawing. They were waiting, closing in with every silent step. Her hand tightened on the comm. She could warn them. But how much truth could she spill before it unraveled her? If she told them everything she saw, if she became their unseen eyes, they would demand to know why she was here. Why she was in position before they were. Why she had disobeyed orders. And the answer was a weight she wasn't ready to give. Not yet. Her mind flickered again. Another convoy, years ago her brother laughing in the back seat. The smell of fuel and dust. The flash of heat as fire swallowed steel. She had waited too long to fire then, held back by orders. And when she finally broke silence, all she had left was the ringing in her ears and a crater of twisted wreckage. She clenched her jaw until it hurt. Never again. Her finger slid to the trigger, but she didn't fire. Not yet. If she pulled too soon, the others would scatter, surround. She had to wait, time it, break the net before it closed. Below, the SEALs shifted, their sergeant's voice rough, calm, carrying authority that only came from years in the field. "We're moving. Stay tight. Watch the high ground." They had no idea. Her heart hammered. If they moved now, they would walk straight into the south ridge, straight into the net. She opened her mouth, comms hissing in her ear. One word, just one, could stop them. But her throat closed. What if they ignored her? What if she was too late again? She forced herself to breathe. In, out. The desert wind licked at her face, dry and sharp. The sound of boots crunching gravel below carried upward. They were moving. Her finger pressed the comm. Her voice cracked the silence again, lower this time, steady, with no room for doubt. "South Ridge," she said. "At least a dozen, hold your advance." Static, then finally. "Who the hell are you?" The sergeant's voice, flat, demanding. Her chest tightened. For a heartbeat, she thought of giving her name, her real one. But the words stuck in her throat. She couldn't, not yet. "Doesn't matter," she said. "You move south, you die." There was a pause, tense, heavy. Then the sergeant's voice again, sharp with decision. "Copy, hold position, eyes south." The SEALs froze, rifles pivoting. One muttered under his breath, "This is insane." Another whispered, "Better listen or we're all toast." She swallowed hard. They had listened, for now. Through the glass she watched the shadows shift again. The enemy crept closer, patient as wolves. She tracked them one by one, the reticle floating over faces she would erase. Her breath slowed. But before she could fire, she felt it, an old ache crawling up her spine. Doubt. They weren't just targets. They were men like her brother had been, like the SEALs below were now. She could almost see the nerves in their hands, the exhaustion in their shoulders. Did they know they were pawns in someone else's game? Did they have a choice? Her hands trembled. She pressed her cheek harder into the stock, forcing the doubt down. She couldn't think like that, not now. One breath, one squeeze. Her shot cut the night, a crack of thunder across sand. A man dropped instantly, the line scattering. Shouts broke through the silence, foreign words she couldn't fully make out but didn't need to. Fear sounded the same in every language. The SEALs below stiffened, rifles snapping toward the south. Finally, they saw it. "Contact South Ridge," one shouted. Gunfire erupted, echoing in bursts that shook the valley. Tracers streaked red across the dark, sparks kicking off rock. The air filled with the deafening chaos of war. Her rifle barked again, steady, deliberate, each shot a heartbeat. Enemy silhouettes jerked and fell, but more kept coming, shadows spilling like water over stone. She adjusted, exhaled, fired again. Voices screamed in her ear, layered, urgent. Push left, cover fire, reloading. Her pulse was ice now, her body moving on instinct. She was Vega. She wasn't a forgotten voice at a briefing table. She was the rifle. She was the line between life and silence. And yet, a flash burned in her scope, muzzle flare from the ridge opposite, not south. A decoy. Her stomach dropped. Her scope jerked, adjusting fast. East Ridge again. Another line of enemies, hidden until now, waiting for the distraction. Moving fast, closing the distance. Her gut clenched. This was bigger than she thought, much bigger. The SEALs didn't know. They couldn't see it. She pressed the comm, voice breaking through the storm. "East Ridge, second line, you're boxed." The sergeant's curse crackled through, sharp and guttural. Then orders fired out, frantic but focused. "Shift right, cover fire east, break the line." Gunfire roared, sparks raining down. Dust burned her eyes, the acrid stench of powder filling the air. She fired again and again, the recoil slamming into her shoulder, steady, relentless. Still the enemy closed. And in that chaos, as the world tore itself apart in fire and screams, she felt it again, that memory. Her brother's face, his voice, the silence after his last breath. Not again, not tonight. Her teeth ground together. She would not let the silence win. Her rifle thundered one last time, louder than her own heartbeat, louder than the ghosts clawing at her chest. And for the briefest moment, the net tore open. Why didn't they break yet? The enemy moved with a patience that unsettled her. They weren't charging recklessly. They weren't desperate. They were coordinated, controlled, like men who knew the land, who trusted the net would close eventually. She fired again, the rifle's recoil jolting her shoulder, the shot echoing across the valley. A target fell, then another. Still, more shadows slid forward, blending with the jagged stone. For every body she dropped, two more seemed to rise. Below, the SEALs roared through the comms, voices sharp with adrenaline. "Cover fire east, shift left, push south. I need ammo." Gunfire sparked against the ridges, red tracers slicing the night. The air stank of burning powder, the taste of metal thick on her tongue. Her hands moved on instinct, cycling the bolt, reloading, sighting again. But her mind was splitting, dragged backward and forward at once. The scene blurred with memory. A burning convoy, smoke thick as tar, screams tearing the radio apart, her brother's voice, "Vega, cover left." Before it was swallowed in fire. She had been too slow then, too careful, too afraid to act without orders. Now she acted before orders. Now she killed before permission. And still, it didn't feel like enough. Her cheek pressed harder into the stock. She could feel her pulse hammering in her temple, every shot a drumbeat against memory. She wanted to believe this was redemption, that every man spared below, every enemy silenced above, brought her closer to peace. But peace didn't come. Instead, a scream split the calms. A seal went down, hit in the leg, his cry jagged, guttural. Voices scrambled over each other. Man down, drag him. The chaos blurring into static and fury. Her scope snapped toward the ridge. She found the shooter instantly, half hidden behind a boulder, muzzle flash betraying him. Her shot dropped him before his next breath. But the damage was done. The wounded man writhed in the dirt, two comrades dragging him back, blood pooling fast. His helmet rolled loose, face pale in the moonlight. He was younger than she expected. She looked away quickly, forcing her eyes back to the glass. She couldn't let herself see their faces, not if she wanted to keep shooting. The sergeant's voice barked through comms, rough, commanding. "We hold here, tighten perimeter." His tone was iron, but she heard it, the crack beneath, the fear. She whispered to herself, the words barely forming, "You're running out of time." Her scope flicked south again. More shadows, more movement. The net was tightening from every side. She could see the lines converging, invisible threads pulling the seals into one shrinking circle. And she knew with a hollow certainty that they couldn't hold. Not like this. Not without something breaking the rhythm. Her finger lingered on the trigger, but her mind drifted again. To her brother's funeral. The folded flag in her mother's trembling hands. The silence of a house that once rang with laughter. She had walked away that day with a vow carved into her bones. Never again. Never again would silence cost lives. Never again would she sit back while men walked into traps. But vows didn't bring peace. They only sharpened the weight she carried. A burst of gunfire snapped her back. Bullets tore into the ridge near her, stone chips scattering against her cheek. She flinched, shifting fast. They had spotted her muzzle flash. Her heart lurched. She wasn't invisible anymore. She rolled to the side, pressing low against the rock, breathing sharp and fast. She could hear enemy shouts carrying across the valley, commands in a language she half understood. They were pointing toward her ridge now, moving toward her. Her hands trembled as she reloaded. She had been safe as long as she was unseen. Now she was hunted too. Below, the seals still fought, unaware their guardian ghost was being flushed out. Voices cracked in her ear, frantic. "Where that fire coming from? Keep your heads down. They're everywhere." She wanted to answer, to tell them she was still here, but her throat locked. She couldn't, not yet. Because the truth was, she didn't know how long she could stay. The enemy was closing on her ridge. She could hear the faint crunch of boots in the dark, the whisper of movement against stone. She shifted her rifle, scanning the slope. Two figures climbing, rifles slung, knives glinting faintly in moonlight. Her breath slowed, one squeeze, one drop. The first collapsed, tumbling down the slope. The second froze, then dove for cover. Her finger twitched, ready for the follow-up shot. But her scope caught his face for just a second, young, terrified, eyes wide in the dark. And for that heartbeat, she saw her brother. Her hand trembled, she couldn't fire. The figure vanished into shadow, alive. She cursed under her breath, pressing back against the rock. Her heart slammed against her ribs. She had broken her vow, hesitated again. And yet part of her knew she couldn't do it. Not to him. Not when his eyes looked so human, so much like the boy she'd lost. Her comm crackled, the sergeant's voice cutting through the storm. "Whoever you are, keep firing. Do not stop." She shut her eyes for a second, the words stabbing deeper than he knew. "Do not stop," as if she had a choice. Her rifle barked again, steady, ruthless, forcing the enemy back. The net trembled, stretched thin, but it wouldn't break forever. She could feel it. This wasn't just a fight. This was a countdown. And the seconds were slipping fast. The seals below were exhausted now, their shouts weaker, their movements slower. One dragged the wounded man across the dirt, Another fired blindly into the dark. The sergeant moved like a wall, shielding his men with every command, but even he was slowing. She could see it in the slump of his shoulders, in the way his rifle dipped between bursts. They wouldn't last much longer. Her chest ached. She wanted to scream at them to retreat, to run, to live. But she knew there was nowhere to run, not in a valley like this, not with the ridges alive with death. So she did the only thing she could. She fired again, and again, and again. Her rifle became her heartbeat, each shot a pulse against the inevitable. But inside the ache grew sharper, because she knew, no matter how many men she dropped, no matter how long she held this ridge, this wasn't about survival anymore. This was about how long they could hold before the silence swallowed them all. And still she whispered to herself, low and steady, "Not yet, not tonight." The wind carried the words away. And the valley held its breath. The valley was bleeding. Muzzle flashes stitched fire across the ridges, echo rolling like thunder, dirt and stone ripped apart with every impact. Smoke clung to the ground, a living thing that strangled the air, blinding the wounded, choking the desperate. The SEALs fought on, teeth bared, eyes burning with exhaustion. Their formation was a cage now, tight, ragged, crumbling. They moved in a desperate dance, shifting to cover each other, dragging the wounded, shouting commands that were drowned by chaos. She could hear it all in her comms, the gasps, the curses, the raw animal sound of men refusing to die quietly. It clawed at her chest. She had heard those sounds before, years ago, and they had ended in silence. Not tonight. Her rifle cracked, muzzle flash cutting through the smoke, another enemy silenced. She shifted again, scope sweeping, eyes scanning for the next shadow that dared to move. Her heartbeat steadied against the chaos. She couldn't falter now. But the enemy wasn't breaking. If anything, they were pressing harder, bolder, driven by the weight of numbers. Their shouts rose, their fire sharpened, and for every man she dropped, more slipped through the cracks. The net was closing again. And then the cry she dreaded. "Medic, medic!" Her breath froze. Through her scope she caught the moment, a SEAL stumbling, his chest jerking backward in a spray of blood. He fell hard, gasping, clawing at the dirt. Another dropped to his side, pressing hands against the wound, shouting into comms. She swung fast, found the shooter, ended him in a heartbeat. But when she returned to the scene, she saw it in the medic's eyes. The panic, the helpless fury. The man on the ground was slipping away. Her gut twisted. She knew that look. She had worn it once, crouched beside her brother as he bled out in the dust, hands slick with blood, begging him to hold on, begging the world to give her one more second. But the world hadn't listened then, and it wasn't listening now. She pressed her cheek harder into the stock, teeth clenched, vision blurring. This was why she was here, to rewrite that moment, to stop history from repeating. Her fingers squeezed. Another enemy fell. "Stay with me," the medic roared below, voice raw. "Don't you quit." The SEAL gasped once, twice, then went still. Silence on the comms. For a heartbeat, silence everywhere. Then fury. The sergeant's voice cut through like a blade, harsh and ragged. "Keep firing, don't give them ground." The valley exploded again, gunfire roaring. But beneath it all she heard it, the crack in his tone, the grief buried beneath command. Another man gone, another weight on their shoulders. And hers. Her hands shook. She pulled back from the scope, pressing her forehead against the cold steel of the rifle. She had sworn never again would she watch men die while she held the power to act. But here she was, watching, acting, failing. She wanted to scream, to hurl the rifle into the dark, to climb down and throw herself into the dirt beside them, as if her presence alone could shield them from the storm. But she couldn't. She wasn't there to be seen. She was there to kill. Her scope rose again. A burst of fire tore across the SEAL's position, pinning them down. The enemy was advancing faster now, using the chaos, using the grief. She tracked 3 at once, lined them up in her sights, dropped them one by one. But her magazine clicked dry. She cursed, fumbling for another, fingers slipping against the cold metal. The sound of boots scraping stone reached her ears, close, too close. She snapped her head up. Shadows climbing again, eyes glinting, knives ready. She jammed the magazine in, racked the bolts, swung hard. One fell, the other charged. She fired again, the muzzle flash blinding in the dark. He crumpled mid-stride, momentum carrying him forward until he slid at her boots, blade clattering against stone. Her breath hitched, too close, too damn close. They knew she was here now, really knew, and they wanted her gone. Below, the SEALs fought blind, unaware their hidden guardian was bleeding for them too. The sergeant's voice roared again. "We're not dying here. Hold the line." His words were iron, but his body betrayed him. She could see it in the slump of his movements, the heaviness in his steps. He was running out of fuel. And then another scream, another man down. Her chest caved inward. They couldn't hold much longer, not like this. Not trapped, not bleeding, not surrounded. Her vow whispered in her skull, never again. But vows didn't win battles, actions did, sacrifices did. Her hand hovered over the comm switch. For the first time she thought about breaking the silence, revealing herself, telling them she was here, that they weren't alone, that they had more than ghosts on their side. But if she spoke, if she revealed her position fully, they'd all know, friend and foe alike, and the hunt for her would grow sharper, deadlier. Her heart pounded, silence or revelation, safety or sacrifice. She stared at the bodies in the dirt below, their brothers bleeding, their circle shrinking. She stared at the bodies near her ridge, the men she had killed, the blade at her feet. Her choice was already made. Her thumb flicked the comm, her voice cracked the silence. "This is Ridge 1. I've got you covered, don't stop moving." For a heartbeat, nothing, just gunfire, shouts, chaos. Then the sergeant's voice, low, shocked. "Who the hell?" "No time," she cut him off, her tone sharp, commanding. "Focus, push west, I'll hold north." The SEALs shifted instantly, instinctively obeying the unseen voice. Their formation turned, rifles blazing in a new direction. And she unleashed hell. Her rifle sang, every shot a hammer, every flash a promise. The enemy faltered, stunned by the sudden precision. Their net trembled, lines breaking where she struck hardest. The SEALs surged, dragging their wounded, covering each other with a fury sharpened by loss. They didn't know her name. They didn't need to. Her fire was their shield, her voice their anchor. And for the first time that night, hope flickered. But hope was fragile. Because deep down she knew the truth. By speaking, by revealing herself, she had shifted the battle. She had bought them time. But she had painted a target on her back. And the valley was listening. How long could a single voice hold back death? The answer was written in the sound of her rifle, sharp, steady, relentless. Each shot bought them seconds. Each second was life. But seconds were fragile, and ammunition was finite. She felt the weight of every round she fed into the chamber, as if each was drawn from her own blood. The SEALs moved west as she commanded. She tracked their shapes through smoke and shadow, covering their flanks, thinning the enemy where the net was weakest. Their silhouettes were bent with exhaustion, shoulders straining as they dragged the wounded. They had no idea who she was, only that someone unseen had chosen to bleed for them. But the enemy adapted. Figures shifted, squads splitting. They fanned wider, circling. She heard the shouts ripple across the valley, orders barked in harsh syllables carried by rage. They wanted her silenced. They wanted the ghost on the ridge. Her scope caught the glint of glass. She froze, a sniper. Her breath narrowed to a thin thread, heartbeat slowing. His barrel shimmered in the distance, angled at the sergeant below. He hadn't seen her yet. She fired first. His head snapped back, body tumbling from his perch. Dust rose like smoke from his fall. But another took his place almost instantly, then another. They weren't retreating anymore, they were hunting. Her hands trembled as she reloaded. She had seen hunts before. She knew what happened when the prey became too costly to ignore. The comm crackled suddenly, the sergeant's voice ragged. "Ridge 1, whoever you are, keep talking." Her throat closed. Talking wasn't her strength. Talking was what she avoided. But she heard the plea beneath his words, the weight of men clinging to something unseen. She swallowed, pressed her mic. "I see you. Keep moving. 10 more meters and there's cover. Don't stop, don't look back." They obeyed, not because they trusted her, but because they had no choice. And yet, as they pushed west, she realized the truth. Her ridge no longer gave her the angle. She could barely cover them now. If they kept moving, she'd lose sight. And once she lost sight, she'd lose them. Her jaw clenched. She couldn't stay hidden anymore. The decision landed heavy, inevitable. She would have to move, to leave her shadow, to join them. She slung the rifle across her back, boots scraping against stone as she slid down the ridge. The descent was sharp, jagged, each step threatening to break her balance. Rocks gave way, tumbling beside her, betraying her position. Shouts rose from the enemy side. They had heard. They were watching. She hit the ground hard, knees jarring, lungs burning. She didn't stop. She sprinted low, weaving between scattered boulders, the storm of gunfire chasing her like a curse. The SEALs appeared ahead, figures crouched behind a fractured wall of stone, firing into the haze. Their heads snapped toward her, shock flashing even in the chaos. For a second, their rifles almost lifted toward her. Then they saw the rifle on her back, the headset on her ear, the grit on her face, and the fire in her eyes. "Ridge 1, the sergeant rasped. She nodded once, breathless. "Keep your men alive." It was all she said, all she could. They didn't ask more. They didn't have time. She dropped beside them, rifle already swinging forward. Her cheek pressed into the stock, her scope clearing the haze. She picked targets with ruthless precision, her shots threading into the rhythm of their fire. Together, for the first time, they weren't just surviving. They were pushing back. The sergeant barked commands, his voice steadier now with her at his side. "Move on my mark, go." They surged again, leapfrogging positions, firing, covering. She moved with them, her silence a counterpoint to their shouted orders. She wasn't part of their team, not yet, but she was their shadow, their blade in the smoke. And yet beneath the rhythm of survival, she felt it building. The cost. Her shoulder burned from recoil. Her hands ached from loading, fingers raw, blood mixing with oil. Her body screamed with fatigue, but her mind screamed louder. Every time she blinked, she saw her brother's face. Every cry for a medic dragged her back to that day. And every man that fell tonight threatened to bury her vow again. The medic stumbled beside her, sweat pouring down his face, hands red from tending wounds that refused to close. He muttered under his breath, almost to himself, "I can't lose another, not another tonight." She didn't answer, she couldn't, but she heard him, and she carried his words like a stone in her chest. They reached a new position, a cluster of jagged rocks, deep enough to shield them for a breath. The sergeant crouched, chest heaving, eyes scanning the haze. His gaze fell on her, hard, searching. "You weren't on the roster, who sent you?" Her fingers tightened on the rifle. She didn't look at him. "Does it matter?" A pause, then quieter. "It does to me." She didn't answer, couldn't. If she spoke, she'd unravel. If she told him why she was here, what she was chasing, it would crack her open in the middle of battle, and cracks got people killed. Instead, she rose, scope cutting through the smoke again. Her silence was answer enough. The sergeant exhaled, long and slow, and turned back to his men. Orders resumed, clipped and sharp. But his glance lingered. The fight didn't end. It couldn't. The enemy surged again, shadows pouring through the haze, relentless, tireless. For every body they left behind, another filled the gap. And as the night deepened, she knew the truth she hadn't spoken aloud. They couldn't win this by holding, Not here, not like this. Something had to give. Someone had to. Her vow echoed again. Never again, never again. She tightened her grip, her jaw, her heart. If sacrifice was the only path forward, she was ready. How long could they keep fighting without breaking? The question hung in every gunshot, every scream, every ragged breath. The valley had become a furnace, heat rising from spent barrels, smoke choking every lung, the air itself poisoned with dust and blood. The night sky above seemed too calm, too distant, as if mocking the storm below. They were dwindling. She felt it in the silence between bursts of fire, the absences, the missing voices on comms. Men who had shouted minutes ago were quiet now. Their rifles lay abandoned in the dirt. She pressed her eye to the scope, willing herself to ignore the ache in her chest. Focus. Sight, breath, trigger. A body dropped, shift. Another. But the targets kept coming, shadows surging through haze, eyes burning with the certainty of numbers. Beside her, the sergeant slammed a fresh magazine into his rifle, jaw set, face streaked with grime. His hand shook just slightly when he reached for the radio. "Command, this is Ghost 6. We need—" He cut himself off, static hissing in reply. No rescue, no air cover, no one was coming. His silence said what none of them dared voice. They were alone. She pulled the bolt back, chambering another round, her voice low in the comms. "West Ridge is thinning. Push now while you can." The sergeant glanced at her, eyes hollow but sharp. "And you?" She didn't answer. She couldn't. If she told him her plan, he'd refuse it. If she stayed silent, he might guess. The men moved, dragging the wounded, firing in bursts. She covered them, her rifle speaking for her. But the magazine ran dry again, and when she reached for another, her fingers found only one left. One. She stared at it, the last weight in her pouch. One more breath of life, one more heartbeat borrowed. Then nothing. Her hands trembled. She closed her eyes for half a second, hearing her brother's voice again. Laughter on a sunlit morning, cut off by a scream in the dirt. She had sworn never again, sworn to be the hand that turned the tide. But vows didn't stop bullets. The enemy's shouts grew louder, closer. Shapes darted between the smoke, surrounding, pressing. They weren't afraid anymore. They could smell blood. A grenade arced through the haze. She saw it, body moving before thought. She lunged, grabbed, hurled it back. The blast lit the ridge in a searing flash, her ears ringing, body flung sideways. Stones scraped her palms raw as she hit the ground. The medic grabbed her arm, dragging her upright. His voice cracked. Don't throw yourself away like that." She wrenched free, lifted her rifle again, sighting through blurred vision. "If I don't, you're dead." He froze at her tone, hard, final, a voice that belonged to someone already standing on the edge. The sergeant's shout cut through. "Fall back, last cover, make it count." They stumbled toward a jagged line of rock, the last shelter before open ground. If they broke there, it was over. She fired her last rounds, dropping 2 more shadows, buying seconds. Then the click of emptiness, the cold finality of steel with nothing left to give. Her hands dropped. She looked at the rifle, at the scope that had been her world, and she knew. It wasn't enough. Her pistol came free, lighter, desperate. She fired into the dark, every shot a scream, every pull of the trigger a plea. The enemy wavered, but not enough. The sergeant slammed against the rocks beside her, eyes burning with a mix of rage and sorrow. "We can't hold." She turned to him, chest heaving. Her voice was steady, though her heart quaked. "You can, if someone stays." His face hardened instantly, as if he understood too well. "No, we move together, all of us." She almost smiled, almost, the kind of smile that hurt more than it healed. "Not tonight." Her eyes held his for a long beat. The weight of everything unspoken passed between them, her silence, her vow, the ghost she carried. Then she shoved him back toward his men. "Go." He reached for her arm, but she pulled free, lifting her pistol again. firing into the haze with a defiance that was louder than words. The medic's voice cracked behind him. "She's not coming." "Move," the sergeant roared, dragging his men forward, every step a wound. She stood alone now, framed by smoke and fire, her body outlined in flashes of muzzle light. Her magazine emptied, her pistol clattered empty, and still she didn't move. She bent, scooped a fallen rifle from the dirt, and raised it like it belonged to her. Her voice filled the calm one last time, low, steady, almost tender. "Keep walking, don't look back." The enemy surged, shapes breaking through the haze, eyes locked on her. She met them head-on, her fire sparking, her figure unflinching. She was no longer the ghost on the ridge. She was the line in the dust. And in that storm she felt it, peace. Her vow was kept. Whatever came next, she had bought them life. How do you measure a silence? For the SEALs it began with footsteps, the crunch of boots on stone, uneven, heavy with exhaustion. They moved west as she had commanded, dragging the wounded, half carrying each other. Every step was soaked with the weight of what they had left behind. No one looked back. Not because they didn't want to, but because her voice still rang in their ears. Don't look back. The sergeant led them, face carved in stone, eyes hollow. He kept his head forward, his hand steady on the man beside him. Yet every breath felt like betrayal. Behind them the valley still burned. Gunfire echoed, bursts of light flashing against the smoke. Somewhere in that storm she stood alone. Somewhere in that storm she was still fighting. Or had been. No one knew how long she lasted. The sound of her rifle was swallowed by the chaos, indistinguishable from the storm. But they felt her presence long after they stopped hearing it. Each second of distance they gained was bought with her defiance. Each heartbeat was one she had given them. The medic whispered once, almost to himself, "She's gone." The sergeant silenced him with a look, jaw clenched, throat too tight for words. He couldn't accept it. Not yet. Not until they were safe. Hours blurred. The valley fell behind them, swallowed by the night. They reached an extraction point barely marked on their maps, an abandoned outpost, crumbling walls rising like bones from the dust. They collapsed inside, every man broken in his own way. The wounded groaned. The medic worked with trembling hands, exhaustion dragging him under. The others sat in silence, rifles across their knees, eyes staring at nothing. The sergeant paced. His body screamed for rest, but his mind was aflame. He replayed every moment, the first shot that had cracked the silence, the voice that had steadied them, the figure that had appeared from the ridge like a ghost given flesh. He hadn't asked her name, he hadn't asked why. And now he never could. He stopped at the doorway, staring out into the desert. The horizon was paling, dawn breaking in fragile strokes of light. The world was moving forward, careless, unknowing. He clenched his fists, knuckles white. She had saved them. Every single man still breathing owed her their lives. Yet she would be remembered by none of them, not truly, not in the way she deserved. The radio crackled faintly, static breaking the silence. He grabbed it, voice rough. "Command, this is Ghost 6. We've reached fallback, casualties heavy." His throat caught. He forced the next words out, steady. "But we're alive, thanks to an asset on the ridge." Static, then a voice cold, detached. "Asset, clarify." He hesitated. His men watched, silent, the weight of their eyes pressed against him. He closed his own, exhaled slowly. "Never mind, doesn't matter, just know we didn't make it out alone." The calm went quiet again. The medic's voice broke the silence, hoarse. "She was one of us, whether the books say it or not." The others nodded, not loud, not eager, just quiet agreement, because in their hearts they knew. Morning rose. The sun painted the valley in pale gold, revealing scars of battle, the shattered ridges, the scorched earth, the bodies left behind. Among them somewhere lay her, rifle in hand, face turned to the sky. But none of them saw it, none of them would. Her story ended in silence, in dust. Yet her choice lived on. In the men who breathed, in the voices that carried forward, in the brothers who would tell no tale yet carry every weight. The sergeant sat at last, head in his hands. For the first time in years he prayed, not for himself, not for his men, but for the nameless woman who had stood alone in the fire. And in that prayer he realized something. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts.